Hello everyone and welcome to my first ever deck guide featuring the newly released Mitsurugi Ritual archetype as well as an old favorite of mine, the Ogdoadic Snake Pile. You've just seen what the deck can do, so now we're going to deep dive into how it does it. We'll be examining the cards in each part of the deck, then at the end going over some possible combos based on what your opening hand looks like. So first we're going to talk about the new Mitsurugi cards. This is a brand new world premiere archetype debuting in Supreme Darkness. And with all of its members being reptiles, their play is a very tribute-focused ritual strategy. Going over the non-ritual creatures first, we have only two at the moment, Saji and Kusanagi. Both of these level 4 dark reptile anime boys have an effect that activates when they are either summoned or tributed. Saji searches a Mitsurugi spell or trap from deck to hand, and Kusanagi returns any Mitsurugi card from grave or banishment to hand. They both share their second ability, which, if another reptile you control would be destroyed by effect or battle, you can tribute them instead. These are highly searchable extenders and protection effects, but neither starts a combo on their own, so we leave them at 1 each. As an aside, I just want to mention that this list is immediately after release and will almost certainly end up being suboptimal. For example, an argument could be made for more copies of Saji since he's important to get at some point, but he is not a one-card starter, and so he could possibly clog up an opening hand. Next, we've got the two Mitsurugi boss monsters, Futsu no Mitama no Mitsurugi and Ame no Murakomo no Mitsurugi. Outside of their lethal names, each of these guys does a ton for the deck. They share the ability that if they are tributed, you can search your deck for any Mitsurugi card and add it to hand and then special summon them back to your field. This is obviously a hard once per turn for each of them, but gives you some very interesting protection against removal that is traditionally super hard to interact with, such as the Kaijus and Nibiru. And being unable to remove Futsu in particular can be insurmountable considering his other ability, which activates when an opponent special summons one or more monsters, and once per chain, lets you special summon a reptile from your graveyard. That means it doesn't matter if the opponent can take out everything else you have, you can rebuild your entire board brick by brick alongside their combo. This makes the entire board extremely sticky considering you also have tribute and destruction protection. Ame has two other abilities instead. First, if special summoned through any means, it can destroy all of the opponent's monsters. That works through its own effect, Futsu, Dynamondo, and any number of other things that just become a board wipe. The other effect is a little bit less devastating, but can still be brutal to try and play through. Once per turn when the opponent activates a card, you can respond and make them discard a card from hand or negate the activation. A single-use General Raiho is fine by me. So how are we actually summoning our lovely snake friends? Well, every ritual archetype needs a ritual spell, and Mitsu's is simply named Mitsurugi Ritual. But don't let the basic name fool you, this card is kind of cracked. It has two effects, and you can use each of them once per turn. It can be used to summon any reptile ritual card, just in case they add more of those in the future, but for now we have just the two. It can summon from deck by tributing from hand and field, or it can summon from hand by tributing from your deck. With all of the Mitsurugi's effects triggering when they are tributed, this thing allows you to not only get your bosses on the field, but fill your grave and find extenders too. I'm playing 2 copies at the moment because it is searchable through Saji, who is also very searchable. But you absolutely have to have one, and if you open it, it just lets you search the other Mitsurugi spell. Mitsurugi Prayers is a toolbox card that lets us either search a Mitsurugi monster to hand, or take 800 damage and special summon one from hand or graveyard, with the limitation that it cannot attack directly while it's on the field. You can also choose to tribute a reptile from hand or field on activation and apply both effects. While this can simply be used to search Saji and then summon him out to search the ritual spell, it has plenty of other applications as well. You can search, for example, a ritual monster to hand, and then summon a used Saji from grave as XYZ material. It is the best card in the archetype at getting you exactly what you need at any given moment, so we play 3 copies. The last Mitsurugi card in the deck is the only trap the archetype currently has access to, but it is a devastating one. Mitsurugi Great Purification allows you to tribute a level 5 or higher reptile to negate and destroy an opponent's effect. Remember that tributing comes with heaps of upside in this deck. It also comes with some niche follow-ups, since you can banish it to special summon any reptile from graveyard and tribute a different monster you control. That's it for the Mitsurugi cards. We play all of the ones that are currently available, so there's not a whole lot of tech you can or can't play within the archetype. They're all needed for the combos, so it's just kind of up to you the numbers you would like to play. Next up is the Ogdoadic engine, beginning with our starters. First up is Nunu, who, like his counterpart Naoya, can discard himself to send a dark reptile from deck to the grave. Most of the time you will be wanting to send Zoha, which lets you put 2 level 4s on board and get off to the races. The discard is at cost, which is great because of his second effect. Nunu can special summon itself from the graveyard if you have no monsters or any Ogdoadic monster on the field. It banishes when leaving and is once per turn, but this card is fantastic at baiting Ash against people who don't know the lines, and you still get value off of it. Naoya has a similar first effect, sending itself to send a light reptile this time from deck to graveyard. The other effect lets you search an Ogdoadic spell or trap when Naoya is summoned, but it cannot special summon itself in any way, which is why you send our next card off of the first effect. Curse is only useful when it is in the graveyard, but it is an incredibly scary extender with the ability to tribute any monster on your field to special summon itself. This effect lets the opponent reborn a monster as well, but negates any effects it might have. That sounds bad for you, but the deck can actually unlock some extra plays if the opponent has a monster on their side of the field, so it's normally better for them to not reborn anything. Either way, when Curse hits the field, he brings back a level 4 Ogdoadic from grave, almost always targeting Naoya to get that spell search. The last part of our starter package is the aforementioned Zoha. While not a starter on his own, he has the ability to return from grave to hand by sending a card from hand to graveyard. This lets you normal summon him off of the Nunu send. His other effect is more niche, but definitely good to keep in mind. If he is summoned from the graveyard, or sent from your field to the graveyard, which is an odd combination of triggers, but sure, he can make your opponent draw a card, while you instead get to search any Ogdoadic monster, and then both of you have to discard a card. A search is traditionally better than a draw, so you almost always come out ahead in the deal, especially as a deck who revolves around sticking cards in the graveyard anyways. Our next extender is a little bit odd. While it reads like a custom card made for the deck, it has traditionally seen little play due to its strong restriction. Thankfully, with the Mitsu package, we can play an all-reptile end board and no longer have to worry about it. Nephilibis is a level 10 that triggers if it is in the graveyard, and you send another monster from hand or deck to join it. The trigger lets it special summon itself and then locks you into special summoning only reptiles until the end of the next turn. He is, however, worth all the trouble, considering its other effect to special summon any monster in your graveyard at no cost once per turn. This makes it an easy way to fill gaps in the combo. Need one extra level 4? You got it. Just want to make an extra boss? Grab Aaron with them. Who's Aaron, you may ask? Why, our last archetypal Ogdoadic monster, of course. Aaron is a main deck boss monster with some nifty effects. For starters, he can special summon himself from the graveyard by tributing any 2 monsters on your field. Once on the field, he waits for your opponent to add any card to their hand outside of their normal draw for turn, and then strikes, forcing them to send a random card from hand to graveyard. He also acts as follow-up, allowing you to add a reptile from deck or grave to hand whenever an opponent's monster is sent to their grave by card effect, such as his own card effect. As for Ogdoadic spells, we have 3 good ones. Daybreak is the deck's bread and butter and is almost always what you search off Naoya. The others are searchable, however, in case you open Daybreak and want a different extender. As for Daybreak itself, this card allows you to tribute any reptile monster and make level 2 tokens equal to its level divided by 2. That means a whopping 4 tokens off of Curse or either Mitsurugi Ritual monster, which then comes back anyways. It's not impossible to fill your board with all 5 by tributing Nephilibis in some weird lines, and that's not even all the card does. Its second effect lets you banish it from the graveyard, shuffle a banished reptile back into the deck, and then send a reptile of your choice from deck to grave. This effect is, again, great for filling gaps in your combo. It can put Aaron in your graveyard, it can trigger Nephalibis to reborn itself, or it can do both. Our other spells are less directly important to the combo lines, but both are very good extenders under certain circumstances. Water Lily lets us send any reptile from our deck to grave, hooray for archetypal Foolish Burials, and then if you have 4 or more different reptiles in your graveyard, you can special summon one of them, hooray for archetypal Monster Reborns, both on the same card. And lastly for the Ogdoadic stuff is Serpent Strike. I feel like this is our weakest spell, and I flip it back and forth between 1 and 0 copies, but it's by no means bad. This continuous spell lets us send any monster from hand to grave to reborn a reptile with a different attribute. While on the field, if a monster is sent to the opponent's graveyard, say by them activating a hand trap, you get to send any reptile from your deck to the graveyard. Hey look, it's another Foolish Burial Monster Reborn combo. This one's just more conditional and committal, so I like Lily more in most cases. Strike is good at getting garnets like Curse out of your hand and into the graveyard though. That's it for the Ogdoadic section. We have a few generic reptiles to go over real quick though. Nightsword Serpent summons itself when sent to the graveyard by a card effect. Simple enough, but remember that it has to be effect and not cost. Zoha's Search and Discard effect works, but if you discard it in order to get him back to hand, it does not because that works as a cost. That's okay though, because most of the time you don't want it in hand at all, you want to be sending it off of Snake Rain. This card is the most infamous card in reptile piles, for good reason. At the low cost of discarding a garnet from your hand, you get to conduct 4 Foolish Burials simultaneously. However, all monsters sent must be reptiles. This is the best starter in the deck by far, and it isn't even once per turn. Nothing feels better in this world than your opponent ashing a Snake Rain, and you just drop a second one anyways. We'll go over the standard pile during the combos section. We also play 1 copy of Reptilian Coatl, who is a fine extender, special summoning herself from hand if you have a dark reptile on the field, which we always do. But she is also a tuner, which unlocks a couple of interesting synchro plays from our extra deck. She also can special summon any number of Reptilians from hand, but that's irrelevant for our deck since she's the only one we play. And our last piece for the engine is a single copy of Planet Pollutant Virus. This card is part of what is affectionately known as the Alien Lock, and essentially acts as a one-sided skill drain that we search as part of our combo. Lastly, for the main deck, we play 11 non-engine pieces. While there are cuts we could make to play more, I prefer to run light in the hopes of going first, and just boarding into a ton of going second stuff when needed. I won't go over all of this stuff here, but of note is the inclusion of 3 copies of Ghost Bell. We really don't like people touching our graveyard, so while she's normally a fine card either way, she does gain extra value for us. I'm thinking about making a comprehensive guide to hand traps and interaction for beginners at some point, so please let me know if that's something you'd be interested in watching. Now, on to the extra deck. First off, we play 3 copies of the King. This is non-negotiable, as any 2 level 4s slap together into him and search any reptile to hand. This is a soft once per turn, and it is quite possible to go through all copies in a single combo line, similar to what Jasmine does for plant decks. He searches Naoya while being a body to tribute to Curse, he searches Mitsurugi pieces, he searches everything! Our only other Xyz monster is Baguska, who is quite easy to make in this deck, and lets us hopefully ride out a turn under Shifter, or Mulch Armies, or anything else we don't feel like dealing with. Links make up the bulk of our extra deck, starting with Haggard Lizardos. This guy can be made off of any 2 bodies with different names, and is mostly here as a stepping stone to our 3s while drawing us an extra card. We play 2 copies because sometimes his effect to drop a monster's attack is relevant on our second turn. Echidna is here for going second, and in case the opponent made the mistake of reborning something off of our Curse. She targets an opponent's monster and sets its attack to 0, then can activate to search reptiles equal to the number of 0 attack monsters the opponent controls, getting you whatever piece you need as you link upwards. I also play 1 Dynamondo in here to do some tricks with Ame no Makoto, special summoning it for the board wipe, but it doesn't normally make it onto the standard end board. We also don't often summon Little Knight, but she's nice to have once in a while just in case you need her. Our last link too is Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame, which is part of the Alien combo. On his own, he lets us discard a monster to put counters on monsters on the field equal to the discard's level. That doesn't do much unless we also have our first link 3, Cosmic Slicer Zarol. Zarol is the last part of the Alien lock, searching our planet pollutant virus and making any opponent's monsters with an A counter on them switch to defense position and making their effects unactivatable. He also has a third effect to remove 2 counters from anywhere and let you normal summon a reptile. Discard from M-Frame, add counters, remove the counters, get extra normals. It's a neat little effect, but he's mostly here for the one-sided skill drain. We have a couple of Raikas rounding out our links. Snapper lets you remove back row by banishing monsters from your graveyard, and she keeps coming back turn after turn. The Raikas are really useful in drawn-out grindy games, including Chain Coils as our only rank 4. She's a bit niche, but she stops decks that rely overly on monster effects in hand by triggering when they activate one and preventing either player from doing that again for the rest of the turn. The last 2 in our extra deck are the Reptilian Synchros. We can go into these off of our copy of Coatl. Hydra sees very little play, but sometimes you want to use her in conjunction with Echidna to remove something and or get an extra draw. Melazine sees a lot more play, being a tower of sorts. She cannot be destroyed by effect or battle, and if she is sent to the graveyard by an opponent, you can add any reptile from deck to hand as follow-up. She also has a wonderful little niche disruption effect, letting her respond to an opponent's activated monster effect by targeting an opponent's monster and permanently changing its attack to 0. Did I mention this effect is once per chain and not once per turn? I've had her solo entire games against Tenpai before, and in general she puts in a lot of work against going second decks. Our sideboard is full of going second cards and hand traps that are good against specific decks. Nothing too fancy there. That's it for the entire list. There's a lot of other cards that you could theoretically run, like more Reptilian cards, or Black Mamba sees play in a lot of lists, but I like to keep this one pretty concise and reliable. Historically, reptile piles get up to 60 cards often, and that makes finding your best starters pretty rough. So next we're going to go into some basic combos that you can do with your different starters. Alright, so now we're going to do some combos, starting with a Mitsurugi only combo. We only have Mitsurugi Ritual and Prayers in hand as engine pieces in this hand, but that is perfectly okay. Just remember that Mitsurugi does not currently have a 1-card starter, so if you only had one or the other, or even Saji or Kusanagi, that is not good enough. We need 2 pieces, but this will work just fine. So we're going to start by using Prayers to get Futsu out of the deck into hand, which we can then use our Ritual to summon by tributing Kusanagi and Nightsword Serpent from the deck. Nightsword brings itself back, and Kusanagi gets the Ritual back to hand. We can then use Ritual again, tributing Futsu to get Ame out of the deck. Futsu brings itself back and searches Saji, and we have not normal summoned yet, so Saji can get us the trap and overlay into King of the Fair Limps. King detaches a piece to get us Naoya, which gets us into the Ogdoadic portion of the deck. We can then tribute Ame to get Curse. Curse brings both itself, Naoya back, and then Ame brings itself back from being tributed. It also will search us up a card. That will be Mitsurugi Prayers. Naoya comes back. Naoya is actually going to search us Ogdoadic Water Lily. We can then link off Curse and the King of the Feral Imps into Haggard Lizardos. Haggard Lizardos can banish Curse from the graveyard to draw us a free card, which will be Ogdoadic Serpent Strike. We then use Water Lily to send Nephilibyss to the graveyard. We also have more than 5 cards in the graveyard, which means that Ogdoadic's Water Lily can bring back Saji to go into the Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame. Shock Trooper allows us to discard any monster from hand to add counters, and because we discarded a monster from hand, we can bring back the Nephilibyss. Nephilibyss brings back Saji again, and we use the Nephilibyss and the Lizardos to go into Zarol. Zarol is going to search us Planet Pollutant Virus, and we set everything. And so this is what our end board looks like on this combo. We have the Alien Lock between Zarol, Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame, and Planet Pollutant Virus. Saji is here to tribute himself in place of any of our reptiles being destroyed. Serpent Strike acts as follow-up for next turn, called by an Ash in hand still. Great Purification is a negate and a tribute outlet, which will allow us to tribute Ame to blow up the board. Also, we can use prayers for that if we need to. We can also use prayers to get Kusanagi as an additional protection. Futsu is here to bring everything back over and over and make sure that the opponents can never truly deal with our board. Alright, so now we're going to watch a combo that we can do if Nunu is the only piece of engine in our starting hand. Technically, he is our weakest one-card starter, but a one-card starter nonetheless. So, you activate Nunu to send itself to grave. It's also going to send Zoha to grave. Nunu can reborn itself. Zoha can send any card to bring itself back to hand. We can normal summon it to go into King of the Feral Imps. King of the Feral Imps fetches Naoya. Naoya sends Curse to the graveyard. Curse can tribute King of the Feral Imps to bring itself and Naoya back. Naoya then searches the Ogdoadic Daybreak, which can tribute the Curse to make 4 tokens. We now have 5 material on board, and that is enough to go into Haggard Lizardos, which will draw us an extra card, still a piece of non-engine, and then we can go into Cosmic Slicer's Roll, searching the Planet Pollutant Virus, and the Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame. This establishes the Alien Lock, along with having 4 other pieces of non-engine in our hand. Alright, so now we're going to look at a Snake Rain combo. Snake Rain is our strongest one-card starter, and if you have a hand that looks something like this with Snake Rain and a bunch of stuff to push it through, you're probably in a pretty good position. Getting started, the Snake Rain has to discard a material, which will be Imperm here, and I want to talk about the standard pile for just a moment. If you activate Snake Rain, you get to send 4 reptiles to the graveyard, and most of the time those are going to be Night Sword Serpent, Curse, Naoya, and Nunu. Just remember that if you have any way to get Curse, Naoya, and Nunu into the graveyard from your opening hand, you can send other extenders such as Nephilim instead. But these 3 have to hit the graveyard for you to do much in the way of comboing. Moving right along, the Night Sword Serpent brings itself back when sent to the graveyard, and we contribute it to bring back the Curse. Curse brings along Naoya. Naoya is going to search Ogdoadic Daybreak, and then we can bring back the Nunu from the graveyard to overlay into a King of the Feral Imps. King can detach a material to find Saji. Saji is going to normal summon itself, because we haven't done that yet, and find us Mitsurugi Ritual, which we can use to summon Futsu from the deck by tributing Curse. We're then going to make 3 materials with Ogdoadic Daybreak, tributing Futsu. Remember, we're making 3 materials. Technically, it will allow you to make 4, but if you do that, the Futsu cannot bring itself back, which means we don't get a search, and that becomes tragic. So now Futsu brings itself back, and we can use 2 of our materials to go into Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame. I'm going to use Daybreak's effect in Graveyard here to send Nephilim. We're then going to use Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame to discard a monster from hand and add 3 counters to itself. This will become relevant in a moment. Nephilim reborns itself from the graveyard because we sent a creature, and then we can use 2 materials to go into Lizardos, banish a card to draw a card, and then go into Zerol. Zerol's going to search for Planet Pollutant Virus, and we're going to use its effect to remove the counters from earlier from Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame to allow us to normal summon Kusanagi. Kusanagi allows us to get Mitsurugi Ritual back from the graveyard to hand, and then we can use Nephilim Reborn effect to bring back Saji, overlay into a King of the Feral Imps to look for Ame, and then Ritual summon Ame by sending the Aaron from deck to graveyard. Aaron can then tribute 2 cards, including the Ame, to bring itself back, and the Ame brings itself back while searching us the trap. So we're back with some closing thoughts on the deck and generally the power level of the new Mitsurugi cards. The first thing I want to point out is the lack of one-card starter in the Mitsurugi archetype. I'm really hoping that in the second wave of support, we get one card that ties the whole thing together and makes it a lot easier to get into both of their ritual monsters. But at the moment, they have a significant amount of power. In addition to having disruption, these cards are powerful in that they are sticky. They are very difficult to actually remove, and that is the sign of a good boss monster in this day and age. That said, they are a bit of a pain to go into. If you do not open Snake Rain or any other starter and a Mitsurugi card, it is very difficult to actually pull the Mitsurugis out of your deck. That said, the Ogdoadic stuff is the same as it always has been. If you don't draw Snake Rain, then you only get into the Zerol Alien Lock combo. Sometimes that's good enough. Most of the time nowadays decks can get around that. That said, the deck has quite a few starters and not too many bricks. Even the garnets that it does have, such as Curse and Nephilibyss, are soft garnets because your combos will send them to the graveyard for you where they want to be. That means that it's really hard to draw into a hand that does absolutely nothing in this deck. It's almost entirely gas. The worst you can do is draw cards that you would like to instead be searching, such as Planopollutant Virus and Mitsurugi Great Purification. Those can clog up your hand and make it harder to play, or reduce the amount of non-engine you have, which can be a death sentence nowadays. But as far as the actual deck itself, it's fairly consistent, fairly powerful, and I'm really looking forward to the next wave of Mitsurugi support, which should push it over the edge into hopefully meta viability. As of right now, I don't know that it's going to see much, if any, high-level play, but I do think as far as deck power level, it is pretty high in the rogue tier. Lastly, I just want to mention that this extra deck is almost certainly pretty bad. I wanted to go as all in on reptiles as possible and see what we could do with it, but you'd probably be better off having an access code talker in here somewhere, maybe in place of one of the Lizardoses. Dynamondo is an interesting tech card, but I'm not sure how often I would actually use it in games. I have not during testing and everything, so I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be here. Just remember that if you are planning on going into any non-reptile extra deck monsters, you have to do so before summoning Nephilibyss. Nephilibyss is the only Xenolock in the entire deck, but it is a really good card and you do want to use it in your combos. So, with all of that said, I just want to thank you if you actually made it all the way through my very first video, and please, please, please leave a comment telling me, I don't know, what you liked, what you didn't like, if there's a particular deck you want to see. I have ideas, I have preferences, and I'm probably going to immediately start working on my next video, but, you know, eventually I'm going to run out of ones I want to do, and being able to explore an archetype that I haven't because it was recommended sounds fun as well. I'm hoping to turn this channel into a library of Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck guides and general information. I was inspired mostly because when I looked up deck guides, I always just found deck profiles, literally just lists of cards, without any actual explanation of combo lines or what they do, and I always got frustrated by that. I was looking into how to actually play the deck, and people just told me play these cards. I wanted to understand, not just see. And so I decided to take matters in my own hands, and here we are. So please, if this fulfills that role for you, let me know, because I am going to try, and we will iterate, and we will get there together. Thanks once again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.